Hi, everyone. My name is Jasmine Brooks, and I am the creative producer on the Better Future series here at Company One Theater. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I want to thank you all so much for joining us for episode 2. Along with our panelists, we are joined by Jody and Travis, who will be our ASL interpreters for today. Today, we are utilizing live auto-generated captions on Facebook and YouTube. We would love to hear about your experience with those on our survey that will be sent after this episode. Before we get started, we would like to begin by acknowledging that Company One Theater produces work in Boston, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Wampanoag, Nipmuc, and Massachusetts people. It is important to understand and honor the history of Indigenous lands that we occupy and recognize that this acknowledgement is insufficient and does not undo the harm against Indigenous people, but we continue to take steps forward for a more just future. Thank you. The purpose of the Better Future series is to gather together Boston's artists, community leaders, policymakers to better understand the needs of our neighborhoods and to reimagine a future in our city, both in response to the current pandemic and the ongoing fight against the deep-rooted culture of white supremacy. One episode will be released each month and will always be on a Friday at 1 p.m. So stay tuned for future episodes. Now I am so excited to be joined by our panelists today. I'm going to invite everyone to come on in. I'm excited to be joined by Ramona Alexander of Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, Cara Elliott-Ortega, who's the City of Boston's Chief of Arts and Culture, and Tim Hall, who is a co-owner of HipStory. I'm going to pass it over to Summer L. Williams, who is the Associate Artistic Director and the co-founder of Company One, who will be moderating today's discussion. And just for everyone out there, please feel free to leave any questions that you may have for our panelists in the comment section. We would love to answer them live for you. So Summer, take it away.
Hey, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well. Thank you so much for joining us and being here for this conversation. Again, my name is Summer. My pronouns are she, her, hers. So let's jump in. I'd love for each of you to share a little bit about who you are, what you do with your org or institution, and what your org or institution's mission is. How about we start with Tim?
Hello, everyone. So very thankful to be here. Again, my name is Tim Hall. I go by he, him pronouns. I am a co-owner of HipStory. HipStory is a digital media production company. It was founded by Cliff Notes back in 2012. It was actually the name of his first mixtape when he was a part of a group called Valedictorians. Him and I met in 2015, where I joined as his co-owner to help kind of continue to build and grow what he had started. And what we do is offer event production, film production, and audio production. We have a studio, physical studio space, recording studio in Cambridge. And we are often focused on centering marginalized identities in media through music and film. That is our mission and purpose in kind of like the world, to really highlight stories and experiences of folks who are often marginalized, really highlighting and focusing on Black voices and Black stories. We've worked with a number of individuals throughout the city in Boston, so it's been really appreciative to have partnered with Cara and partnered with the city of Boston to do some programming in Upham's Corner. One of our highlighted programs is Boston Answering, which we'll be talking about today, but that's what we do. I particularly, in terms of my role, I do a lot of partnership development, business development, grant writing, organizational management, and managing our kind of event department.
Thank you so much, Tim. Let's pass it on to Cara.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cara Elliott-Ortega. I go by she, hers pronouns, and I'm the Chief of Arts and Culture for the City of Boston, which means I head up the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture. And our mission is to enhance the quality of life of all residents in the City of Boston through the arts, to build access to arts and culture in every community, including through our public institutions and public places, and to help create an equitable and thriving cultural ecosystem in Boston. So that touches a lot of things. It's partnerships, like Tim was saying, with HipStory and local arts organizations and artists, a lot of direct support for artists, which is sort of unusual for city government, public art, public realm, cultural districts, all sorts of things throughout the city. And I've been in my role for 2 years now, but have been with the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture for 5 years.
Thank you so much. And Ramona Lisa.
Hello, everyone. Ramona Lisa here, she, her. I'm so grateful to be here amongst other culture bearers, and this is really exciting. So thank you. I have so much gratitude. I am many things, but I will say I'm here wearing the cap of as the director of programs for Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative. And Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative is a 30-plus-year-old resident-led organization that works to plan for and empower our Dudley residents who are in the Dudley Street neighborhood to create a vibrant, high-quality, livable neighborhood. We started in the midst of what we're kind of in right now, civil unrest, because folks were being dumped on. There was lots of toxic waste in the neighborhood, and we created a Don't Dump On Us campaign and acquired land. And so through that, Dudley Neighbors Inc., which is our sister brother organization that controls our land trust. I am also part of managing the Fairmount Cultural Quarter Initiative. I'm proud to represent this initiative with a number of other partners, but some of which I'll name are a Design Studio for Social Intervention, Art Morpheus, Upham's Corner Main Streets, and the Fairmount Innovation Lab. And so that is a creative placemaking initiative with special thanks to Art Place America, which is coming to an end soon, that helped us form that Kresge Bar Foundation and the Boston Foundation. And so we were able to collaborate with artists, other creative and small businesses to really enliven where we started in Upham's Corner, which we'll talk a little bit more about today. So I'm really excited because we started there and continued along. Really, it started because of the Fairmount Indigo line, and to reinvigorate that line and work with artists to figure out how we could do so. And so I'm really happy to be here today and representing Dudley Neighbors Inc., DSNI, and the Fairmount Cultural Quarter Initiative. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I'm going to ask that, I'm going to throw this question to Kara and make space for anyone who wants to respond. I can't help but mention that today actually would have been the opening of Black Superhero Magic Mama by Inda Galvin Craig at the Strand. Kind of continuing a deep partnership and relationship that we have not only with the city, but also with Upham's Corner. So I'm hoping, Kara, you can share a little info, like tell us about Upham's Corner and its designation as an arts and culture hub.
Yeah, and I'm glad that Ramona shared a little bit of history in her introduction, because Upham's Corner has been a hub for arts and culture for a really long time, and a place where a lot of this has been going on. And the city's designation of Upham's as an arts and innovation district is really more recent on the timeline of all of the cultural work that's been happening in Upham's and in the neighborhood. I mean, it was codified in the citywide plan, Imagine Boston 2030, which came out in 2017, I believe. And so this kind of recent set of collaborations with the city really came out of a unique opportunity to put a lot of neighborhood values and vision into practice with a lot of the partners who had already been doing that work, and Ramona mentioned some of them. So, DSNI, Design Studio for Social Intervention, Fairmount Innovation Lab, Art Morpheus. And the opportunity is that there's city-owned land right in Upham's Corner where we can really control the development process and what we want from development when it comes to things like affordable housing or affordable commercial space. And we also work with DSNI and the land trust to bring property into that land trust so that together we could have more leverage to really dictate how development would happen there. So we were able to bring some of these properties together under kind of a joint city land trust community vision, which is a pretty unique process for city government. And at the same time, there are major city cultural assets that are in Upham's Corner: the Strand Theater, 1,400-seat theater built in 1918, a city commitment to fund and build a new Upham's Corner library, which is a huge financial commitment as well. So it was between the cultural work that's been going on there for decades, these two kind of large anchors of the theater and the library, and that being the basis for an idea of what does development without displacement really look like. and Upham's Corner being a place to really try that with community partnership and community leadership. That's really where this arts and innovation district or arts and culture hub idea emerged from the city perspective. And in partnership with DSNI and a working advisory group that has some community members on it who have been involved in the Strand Theater or in planning efforts also for decades. So a lot of continuity there in terms of what do people really want to see for those spaces and for the neighborhood. And through those conversations, we learned a lot about the Strand, about what it means to local artists, to Black artists and artists of color. What are the possibilities and exciting possibilities for having a new library nearby? And in the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture, we got really excited about what it would look like to deliver on some of that vision sooner rather than later, even if it looked like, experiments or collaborations and pilots and just seeing what can we do to switch what's been going on and try to be really responsive to a community vision that's been, at least for the theater, like really consistent for a long period of time. So we started supporting different collaborations, like working with HipStory, working with Company One, and it's really, it's a sad, it's sad to remember that we would have been opening right around now, because these partnerships take years, and we want to make multi-year commitments, and when we miss one of them, that feels like a really big gap. We partnered with Now and There to bring the Nick Cave artwork to the Bank of America building that's right there in Upham's and next to the theater. And the other thing that I'm really excited that we are able to test, even though we're in COVID times right now, is working with Brighter Boston to bring youth training back to the theater this summer. So hoping that can be another thing that we try, that we can grow. So that's a little bit of like a quick history of how we got to some of the current partnerships that are happening with the city.
That's great. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And it is so sad to know, we would have been so busy today doing so much. Ramona is in the show. We're a little sad about that. We're trying to get HipStory and Tim and Cliff involved. I'm just trying to speak into existence all the things I want to have happen for Craig Galvin's production. So I want to kind of switch gears a little bit and move into a bit of performance. So thank you for sharing that information on Upham's. And we're going to now watch a performance by Tim Hall of HipStory.
Hey everyone, this is Tim Hall, and I'm here to share a piece with you titled Autumn Leaves. I wrote this piece in response to viewing a video of an innocent Black person being killed on social media, and went down this spiral of emotions and just like fear and hurt, pain. And it was my opportunity to kind of get those thoughts and those feelings out. It's a piece that represents to me a reflection of my lived experience, as well as many of other individuals who look like me, who have similar experiences walking through this world as a Black person. So it's titled Autumn Leaves. To live in this skin is to fear breathing. It's to have no control of breathing. It's to walk around with 2 puffs left in my inhaler, hesitant to use it, worried that I won't be able to breathe someday. To live in the skin is to scream with no one listening. It's to bruise easily. It's to bleed easily. It's to die easily. To live in the skin is to walk and be watched. It's to grow eyes in the back of my head. Is to be seen always, yet steadily disappear. To live in the skin is to pass along burden to my offspring. It's to teach them to love their shade. It's to have to teach them to love their shade. It's to prepare them for war over loving their shade. To live in the skin, to see bodies break like branches, To see whole forests chopped down out of fear of their growth, out of concern of their seeds spreading, out of hope that their roots aren't grounded. But to live in my skin is to know that my roots are grounded in the soil rich from the blood of my ancestors. It's to know the families that came before me nourished my tree. Is to see their shade in my bark, their blood in my sap, their tears in my leaves only. To be reminded of the lakes formed from their crying when I see leaves at the feet of trees in autumn. To live in my skin is to keep standing, even when the trees around me are chopped to pieces. It's to know that my seeds can't be wiped out of existence. It's that plant my roots in bloodied soil. It's to believe my tears aren't shed in vain, that my leaves shouldn't have to fall in constant mourning, that my life matters. To live in my skin is to grow. Even when the world around me walks past my pile of leaves, staring at their beautiful colors, not realizing they are the reason my leaves fall.
Wow, Tim, that was incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. That was amazing. Can you give us a little bit of history and insight about Boston Answering, which is HipStory's response to Boston Calling, which is Boston's largest annual outdoor music concert, sort of addressing the lack of representation for local artists, Black artists, artists of color in general. Why was that important that it happened at the Strand in Upham?
So HipStory was in a part of one of the programs that Car was actually mentioning at 555 at the bank next door to the Strand to be one of the artist groups that would occupy the bank and set up shop there. So we were in the process of kind of doing this co-op program with a number of other artists and organizations, and that didn't necessarily pan out the way that we were initially thinking. And there was funds left over to still the purpose of those funds and the support that we were receiving from the city of Boston. Arts and Culture was actually going to go to the organizations who were managing the co-op space to activate it and get us going. That those funds were still left over. So we were thinking of, okay, now that this process is no longer moving forward, what else could we do in the city of Boston or in the area, being that we had these funds left over? And the Boston Answering idea kind of came up separate from that. We were waiting for the lineup of Boston Answering for 2018. Wow, or 2019. And 2018, we all attended Boston, or me, Cliff Notes, a number of other artists, Oompa, and so forth, attended Boston Calling in 2018, and we got to see our homies. Still Gold was up. This was before I joined the band. Still Gold. They were performing live. We primarily went to go see them perform, along with a number of other artists that are from Boston or local to Boston. Michael Christmas, Cousin Stiz, and so forth. So for us, going in 2018 to Boston Calling was such a big deal because we saw people that we hung out with. We were like, oh, wow, those are our big brothers. They're on the stage. And instantly, it gave us validation and inspiration. Like, okay, great. They did it. We can do it. We're gonna be on the stage next year. Like, we kind of like all looked at each other while we're in the crowd, like, we're doing this next year. And then, next year comes along and we see a lineup, whereas 2018, there were about 6 to 8 artists that were from Boston that were recognizable. And then in 2019, we're like, wait, there's no one. There's like no one that we know in this lineup. There's no one that represents the Boston art scene on this lineup. What is up with that? Like, why host this large event in Boston? Call it Boston Calling. and focus it on music, but not incorporate any of the local artists in the scene, being that Boston is on a rise. Like Boston's music scene has been thriving. 2018, or 2020, we were gonna be performing on Boston Calling's stage this year, because of some of the work that we did with Boston Answering. So Boston Answering was this like, yo, well, if you all aren't gonna, feature any acts from Boston, we're just gonna call it Boston Answering and host our own concert. And we started to think about, okay, great, we're gonna do this. Mind you, this is like 3 months before we decided to host the event. We're like, we're gonna do it on the Saturday of Boston Calling. We're gonna stick it to them, and it's gonna be great. And it kind of came off as this very kind of us against you moment, and it wasn't necessarily meant to be that. It was more so like, yo, we're here. Like, just so, like, if you aren't gonna do it, we're gonna do it, and do our own thing. And we realized that we had some funding from the city of Boston, and that funding was primarily meant to activate Upham's Corner. And we're like, wait, the Strand Theater is right there. It's this historic space, very meaningful space and powerful space to the city. Why not? Why not host it there? Why not take the opportunity to really highlight that space and work with the city, work with the Strand, to curate this opportunity there, and it ended up working out great. There's a lot to do in like 3 months to put together a major event. So we were able to partner with Lord Hobo, Air Brewery, Bernstein Music, Newberry Comics, Loop Lab. We partnered with Homegrown Aesthetic, which is a podcast and a group of individuals who are hosting a gallery space to highlight artists. So it ended up working out really, really well.
That's excellent. I want to make a little space for Kara in case you have anything you want to add to that.
No, I mean, it was a real amazing group effort. And I think what was so exciting about it for me was that throughout all of the kind of planning, little history of planning processes and Uphams that I was just giving, Ramona was one of the people who kept saying, this should be the Apollo. This should be the Apollo. Why aren't we talking about the Strand as the Apollo? And I think, my knee-jerk reaction is the Apollo has, $60 million. It was one of those moments where it was yeah, that's absolutely what this should be. And I think seeing how many people from the local music scene came out to support that, and how meaningful it was for people to see, their kind of peers on stage there, was just kind of a revelation. So it was a huge learning experience.
We were surprised that we were able to get roughly 350 people out for an event that was planned within 3 months. Was just wow, okay, we did this. People enjoyed it, and hearing testimonials from, I believe there was an elder who said, it's not my kind of music, but I love that there's people here, and that's what I care about.
That was Bob Haas.
Yeah, I think you shared that with me, Cara. This isn't my cup of tea, but people are here. They're here, and that's what matters. People want this space. So we featured Cliff Notes, Forte, Photo Comfort, Red Shades, and Frequency as the artists. We had Jija, who was the host, who also is a artist and organizer running Black Cotton Club, which is another art space, and incredible leader and organizer in the community. So we really were able to bring our people together. It was, the beautiful thing was yo, friends, let's get together and do this. That's how it felt. It felt like a group of friends coming together to do something really awesome. And we were able to compensate everyone. We were able to take care of all of the artists. Everybody on our team was able to get compensated for the labor and the hard work. So not only was it a beautiful event, but for us, it showed us that we're an organization that's also a business, that's also here about finding ways to sustain ourselves and sustain the people that do this with us together. So that also really felt really good to be able to feel like big boys in a way. Like we kind of like, oh, we did the same thing. Yay. It was dope. Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I hope that eventually, not only will there be Boston Calling, where we see our local artist on the scene, but there will also be continually Boston Answering at the Strand, where lots of folks who are maybe just starting have an opportunity to kind of showcase what they can do. So I want to pivot a little bit because we can talk about this all day, but I want to get a little bit more specific because we're talking about sort of reimagining the summertime in Uphams in light of like what has gone on in the world, with a particular focus on young people, right? And I'm gonna kind of merge two questions together, and then I'm gonna throw it at Ramona just to get us started. So I'm curious about what some of the opportunities and some of the challenges are to being a maker in Uphams. And then we know, and I say we know because I was on the call with these folks, that before COVID-19 sort of landed and disrupted, there was a planning committee that was really hard at work thinking through program development with the focus on young people in Uphams for the summertime. And so I'm curious about what are some of the ideas that were starting to take shape, and why is it so important for us to be really thoughtful about planning really strong public arts and culture driven events in our city's neighborhoods? Like, what's the value in that? So I just said a question that was full of like 15,000 different things. Pick and choose as you will, and then like tag out and tap in anyone else that you'd like to react to.
Sure. I think I'll try to, I guess, go on a journey here to capture a lot of what you said, because I'll start with the opportunities and challenges question. I think it's important to note, even kind of jumping off of the wave that like Tim and Cara were on, thinking about the opportunities for makers with the Strand Theater, being that it's 100-year-old, plus space, right? It's the anchor. I mean, and even my mind is expanded, Cara, of course, from even thinking of just the Apollo, right? But thinking with Benny Saxo Ambush's helping us to think through it being a cultural hub and how it can be anchored into the one of the most, thinking about demographics is also another opportunity, as the most diverse neighborhood in Massachusetts, right? It's one of the 8th largest diverse neighborhoods in the country, North Dorchester is, right? And this is part in Upham's Corner as a hub and part of that. And I think that that's really important to note. It's important that all of the folks who live there, BIPOC folks who are makers, local artists, have a space and place to create there. And with the Strand Theater, as my other mentor would say, Shay Madyun, that it is our theater. It's your theater. It's your community space, right? It's a space for us to take over and to be able to create with an art gallery space, with, all of these ideas that have been percolating around that. And we've been able to collaborate and do some really wonderful things there. I think also the other idea, and I didn't say this in terms of opportunity, that the other strategic focus of DSNI and DNI with development without displacement, neighborhood development, and resident empowerment specifically, and youth voice, since we're talking about youth, that it's important to note that we had acquired another opportunity is a bank, 22,000 square foot bank, which is a old Citizens Bank. And that's another opportunity there where we were trying to think and prototype opportunities. Actually, Company One used this space to build a set for leftovers a few years back, right? And so we're using this space to try to prototype how artists can create, make, perform. The Fairmont Innovation Lab's artistic director, who also is the founder of I Am Creole, Joelle Fontaine, was thinking about doing a trunk show, having a fashion show in there. And it's something we're still thinking about how we can do this right now, but it's an opportunity for makers to use the spaces that are in play when Kara talked also about this process. One of the reasons why we're at the table in this process is because resident empowerment is so important. Right, resident voice is so key. Youth voice is so key. And so we're kind of trying to make sure we keep the pulse on that and make sure that those voices are lifted up and heard and translated, because we know that folks are speaking Cape Verdean Creole, Haitian Creole, Spanish and so forth. And so also I think that it's also important to note that we're having makers and artists help to also interpret that in different ways through physical forms, visual and so forth. So I feel like the only challenge there is that, to continue to figure out how we get people to the space, how we talk to the MBTA about transport, and how we continue to make sure that it's equitable, right, and well led, and having conversations. The MBTA has been really wonderful partner in this, and we're really excited about the things we've also been able to do with the Fairmount line, as well as thinking creatively about transportation. We collaborated with Arts Emerson on a performance and production one-woman show that is escaping me at this moment. I'm sorry, but they shuttled buses into Upham's Corner. So getting over the idea, there was another opportunity right there where we could get over the idea to that transportation wasn't a challenge. Let's shuttle folks there. And Akiba Abaka led that charge, and I think she did an excellent job. So I think that those challenges, Summer, can always be turned into opportunities. And I think the city's been a good partner in that, for us to hold them accountable as well, and for us to kind of continue that dialogue about where we can find intersections. So that said, some of the things that we've been thinking about prototyping, we had youth activate the Citizens Bank building and give us feedback about what they wanted to see in that space, what they wanted to see in the neighborhood, right? Because we also wanted to get that feedback from them. So we spent some time with youth, and they ended up prototyping a garden space, a bowling alley, a movie theater in our building specifically. I'm just speaking specifically to the building now that we've acquired on the Dudley Neighbors Inc. Land Trust, which is the former Citizens Bank building across from the Strand, right? But also how can that complement the Strand Theater, right? And how can we also have other makers prototype stuff? We have Red Sage Stories that has come into that space to do playback theater, right? And so with that, we were also talking with the Comfort Kitchen. So when you talk about convening these folks and other makers, we were talking with the Comfort Kitchen. How could we do a night market? How could we do, a drive-in movie theater and all of these other things with youth at the helm? Podcast with FIL, some other prototypings of things with Upham's Corner, Main Street, some visual stuff, and then Design Studio for Social Intervention. How can they also help to lead the charge with the prototyping of scavenger hunts and other mural making things that we wanted to do? We actually had to stop a mural that was supposed to go up on the side of the Citizens Bank building because we're in the midst of this pandemic. And we had Richard Dean Gomez, who was supposed to lead that. So that's been unfortunate. However, I think my path here, I want to make sure I'm still on track, right? So my path here, I could go into and I also want to say another thing that had been challenged by the pandemic was that we wanted to work with Ife Franklin, who was another mentor of mine, who does Western African textiles and storytelling and so forth, who was going to lead some cemetery tours, right, at the cemetery right across the street from the Pierce building, which is it the Pierce building, Kara? That's the building that's right in Upham's Corner, the cemetery. So she was going to do some ancestral walks and storytelling. And so that's been held up as well. Those were some of the conversations. And of course, Black Superhero Magic Mama, which you had 2 partnerships with myself, who was supposed to be in that show, as well as Joelle, who was supposed to design, fashions. And I'm still looking forward to it. We had
it's still happening.
Ideas about, I know, but I'm just still feeling, I'm still having feelings about it right now, but I'm looking forward to how we can, work to put that up next summer. But I'm just saying, these were the adjustments we had to make, and kind of the sadness around that, because we were talking about comic book fairs and working with Kagan, who's a visual artist, to do some comic book superhero stuff. And how could we connect visual artists with performing artists, and then, fashion design artists and dance and all of this other stuff that we were like lifting that up. And also, how can we get youth involved in helping us to tell those stories and keep those stories alive, and engage also the residents in helping to tell that story, right? And tell their stories, and then have the youth lift those up. So I'm going to pause there. Make sure I kind of my anchor where my compass is, because you did ask me a really big question. But I got really excited, right? I got really excited about it because I always feel like challenges can become opportunities. And I know we'll talk more about that, but I even think in the midst of this pandemic, we've been able to look at those things. As you said, we're still going to do this show, right? So we're looking at ways that we can turn some of these challenges, unfortunately, into opportunities, right? They're not, we're just jumping over them. We're not saying that they're stopping us fully. We're like going under, over, around to try to figure out some things. I think I might tag Kara in to see if I missed anything.
I don't think you've missed anything at all, but I do want to tag Kara into this piece of the conversation because I want to add another little angle in here. Which is, so we do have the opportunity to innovate in this moment. And people are doing it in all different ways, right? We are really rethinking what it means to be an artist in this time, what it means to be a community member, an activist in this time. We are rethinking all of these perspectives. And so a part of what you're going to kind of address in the things that you're thinking about, Kara, I'd love for you to think about what are some ways that we might be able to clear these hurdles? And they're some, very real world limitations right now. And then I think a really big ask, and Tim, I'll invite you as well, because there's a really big ask and opportunity for artists to reimagine the work as they're doing it, and to still do it in a way that's meaningful for the public, and creating space for public, creating opportunity for arts and culture within public sphere. That's all of our mission. So I'd love to hear Kara kind of start and then maybe jump to Tim. And also encourage anyone who's watching, please populate the chat with any questions you might have. We're coming up to that section next.
I think it's a really interesting time to think about what's happening in public space, and how do we think about the scale of things. I mean, we all rely so much on gatherings, and so I think that's just been the most challenging thing, that even if you're able to put things online, you're going to miss that human connection. And we know from surveying artists that they're also not making money putting their work online, work that they couldn't do in a venue. So I think it's challenging, and we've had this rush to make everything virtual, but I think we're now at a point where it's what are the things that we can test in person, and how can we think about doing that in a way that's maybe at a micro scale of just a few people over a longer period of time, or things that are kind of moments of discovery and excitement, like projections onto buildings that travel around, which a couple of people have been doing this summer. What does it look like to try to make a public event under the current guidelines in a way that makes sense? And what are some of the trade-offs? Kind of going back to that, is there a way to do something that's light and small and still impactful, even though we can't gather maybe hundreds of people to be close to each other? So I think that those are all really interesting questions. And we're also using the time where we can't have the Strand open for events to make improvements that make it more flexible. So Wi-Fi is finally coming to the Strand Theater, and other things. Yes, very exciting, decades in the making. So just thinking about how can we be ready to go for the kinds of things that we want to do? How can we use downtime in a way that that makes sense, to be more productive and be more responsive when we come back online? And we've also been thinking about the potential around live streaming. I think it's interesting to think about what lessons are we learning. We've talked about doing a series of kind of live from the Strand, that's live streamed from the Strand under current kind of health regulations, and using that as an opportunity to keep people connected to the space and show the space, pay artists, have some performance opportunities. even though they are virtual. And, I don't know that when we get through this, that we'll ever do events again and not live stream them, or like not caption them, or not have translations, or, I think it's kind of forced this question about like, there's no real excuse to not be as accessible as possible. And I think people have experienced that firsthand, which is really interesting.
That's right. I think that accessibility note is really key, and being thoughtful about how do we get even better at it in terms of because there are still barriers. We might, be able to address one or two things and then discover like, oh, here's this other barrier. And the idea of being in person, but also being able to radiate out is really interesting and really appealing at this time. But that also requires an appetite for the things that we're radiating out, and making sure that the art feels like, necessary, and also making sure that people understand that it's a way into a larger conversation for them. Tim, I look like you wanted to add.
No, I think that it's one of those. It's been one of these moments where it's so unexpected and uncommon to be in a space like this, that I think there's this like push and pull to like, how do we make the most of this time, as well as what is this time telling us about rest, or what is this time telling us about pause, or telling us about re-strategizing, and so forth, that like it's a both and. So I think that making the most of this time for artists definitely looks like the digital space. What has been barriers for you before, and how might you look at that differently now, and incorporate the digital space into your practice. I think it's important for artists to develop and grow with the times, and the times are sharing with us that having some kind of digital presence is important for maintaining that visibility, maintaining some of that relevancy. It doesn't mean that you're not relevant if you're not on the internet at all. It just means that this is what's happening currently, and it might be worth it for you to think about incorporating this into your practice. And then the other side of that is, maybe this time is also showing us that it might be good to go back into the basics and practice and rehearse and really strategize for ourselves. What do we want with our artistry? How are we moving forward? What have I not been able to develop? I think for me, as somebody who, before COVID, I was constantly at a rehearsal or a gig or a show or booking or something. And I realized I didn't have space for practicing. I didn't have space for like really honing in on my weak areas, on really just creating to create and getting back into a flow of imagining what I could be making versus just, working with said artists or developing this and doing. So I've been able to develop more and practice a little more and really kind of go inward into, what am I doing with my artistry? How am I developing the business aspect of my artistry? I'm a great performer, but what can I, because I want that from my artistry, like what are the business foundations that I also need to incorporate and develop and structure so that I'm also working smarter, things around financial management, taxes, website, and so forth, those types of things that are important factors for the type of artistry that I'm interested in. This time has, proposed an opportunity for me to really focus on those things. And I think that's what it's offered for artists as well. As it might not, it's both. You can be focused on figuring out how to perform and to engage digitally, as well as rest, re-strategize, business development, and some other areas that you find are weaknesses or weak areas that you want to develop or that you want to give more space and time to because you didn't have the capacity to before. Yeah,
that's really, really important to hold on to and remember. Ramona, I saw your hand go up for a second.
Sure. I love that, Tim. I just wanted to jump on with some things that Tim said. I really appreciated it. And I think that sometimes there's a pressure in these times, right, for artists to create, because so many folks are looking to artists to answer something or to inspire. And so I appreciate you saying that, because especially, and I've been hearing this, and I know there's a lot of folks tuning in who are creatives and culture bearers and artists and so forth, who have felt that pressure, especially artists, Black, Indigenous, people of color and so forth, who feel this pressure, but also are trying to grapple with the civic uprising and racial inequality, as well as a pandemic, and also not feeling like they want to move, like this numbness, and trying to just also figure out what you're dealing with inside emotionally, right? Like you said, just to kind of have this time to be able to like recenter and breathe and not have to play or perform or to be on call for something or someone, I think is so valuable. It is so key to say, I have permission right now to just be still and to be quiet, and I don't have to, right? I mean, financially, yes, there's other issues there, but I think there's something so important to say right now that, that is also needed. And that has been needed. And that's why I think, just the support for wellness and mental health and so forth has been very key too at this time. So I just wanted to add, I appreciated you saying that, because it's just been also tough on where we're getting it from all different angles. And some are being inspired it inspires some and others don't. And I don't think folks should feel the pressure if they're not ready to create, if they don't, that it's okay to sit in it and to be in it, until you are. Yeah, that's all I wanted to add.
No, thank you for that reminder. It's important, because I think there is that urge to kind of get back on that hamster wheel and just try to figure out how to keep going. And if we don't take, we're in a pause moment, we are in a reset moment in so many ways. And if we don't really check in with our personal missions, with the mission of our work, with the mission of our art, the mission of our kind of what we are meant to be doing here, we're going to really be kind of pulled astray quite quickly, I think. I want to, there are two questions that I want to get like a really quick answer to, because Company One Theater, our mission is to build community at the intersection of art and social change. So we've had lots of great conversation today about community and about art, but we got to talk about some policy really quickly. And I want to give an opportunity for you all to sort of shout out about any policies or things that are happening specifically in Upham that we can all collectively lend our voice and energy to. And it may not be like a policy-based thing. It might be a systemic thing. It might be a access thing. But awareness is the first step in terms of getting people involved and engaged. So I wanted to make an offer. And then I have a really important question before we go to the audience, but we'll get there soon. Anyone want to throw anything out? Cara?
Yeah, I'm happy to start that question. I think one of the biggest issues in the city that is also present in Uphams, and I just think, where we've been kind of exploring and trying things in partnership. And so I think Uphams is a really good place to think about this. And it's, how do we actually support and sustain cultural spaces, especially for Black artists and artists of color? And what is the kind of infrastructure that we need to do that? And some of that is like a straight up money question, and like, where is the sustainable source of funding for that? And some of it is about technical assistance and other kinds of support. And it's, we look to other cities that are also really expensive and hard to afford to live in, like San Francisco. And we see some ways that cities are trying to wrestle with that. And it's, it's a long road, but I feel like we have to collectively push for it, even if we don't exactly know what the policy or the kind of new solution is. I think it has to be kind of at the top of the list, because without some sustainability for those spaces, people are pouring a lot of time and work and effort into things. And how is that going to carry on, and how is that going to be there and have a legacy, 10, 20, 30 years from now? And so that's definitely at the top of my list.
That's great. Thank you. Ramona, are you unmuting? You are.
Yeah. I wanted to just, I wanted to give thanks, to give a shout out, because we have special relationship and gratitude for like State Representative Liz Miranda and Senator Sonia Chang Diaz, who have been really working hard along the lines of like racial profiling and talking about these really challenging topics. But I also, in addition to that, about like the disparity in terms of healthcare. And amidst COVID, I think it's more prevalent than before, right? When we're looking at folks who haven't received care versus those who have, and a lot of those having to do with folks who have low income, as well as folks who are BIPOC, Black, Indigenous people of color, who have been suffering, unfortunately, because of it. And so I think that, there's a few things that I feel like getting involved. One, the Design Studio for Social Intervention has been working on some things to lift up the unseen worker, like the person, who's behind the scenes, who's kind of helping to lift up the work of this and also help to push along like healthcare or like putting themselves at risk to just deliver goods to us and so forth. And so they're going to do some projections on the Strand. And with that, I think they're going to be doing a call soon with artists. And so we're really excited about that, because that grant has come through, the Transformative Art Grant, I think, from the city. And so I think that that's something that soon we can get artists involved in that, to talk about and lift up like the us being in this moment and what that means and how to capture that, right? So it's not completely a policy shift, but it's to kind of lift up the things that are happening and for us to put that on the surface. In addition to that, Upham's Corner Main Street is working with Artists of Humanities to also do some similar installations on the businesses and kind of take inventory of the youth voice in that and all of that and their youth, and to be able to display those around. I think also we're working with the city, Dudley Neighbors Inc., to do COVID testing, free COVID testing in Upham's Corner for those who can't afford to do it. So right now we're doing it in Upham's Corner, and the numbers have increased in terms of who's been coming, but then we want to bring it down along Dudley Street. So yes, it's in Upham's Corner, but we want to make sure that we're bringing it down Dudley Street so that we can get access to those who don't. And I think also with Design Studio for Social Intervention, while this is old, I think it's still relevant, that they do this Don't Let's Flip It campaign, which kind of came out of youth violence and youth voice, right? So that they could speak to the moment of what's happening for them. And I think that the idea would be to reinvigorate that, but also take it to the next level. And it would be interesting time for us to look at that and look at the work that was done previously with that campaign and how youth were talking about violence and systemic violence and oppression for youth in the city of Boston and so forth. But how can they take it past that? And then also the Black Citizenship Project that talks about Black bodies and violence. And although we did that in 2016, it's still relevant now, right? And also be interesting to look at the Black Citizenship Project and what is and how Black bodies are affected by violence and so forth, but also look at that in the context of now and take it again to the next level and see what we could do with that, So I know that was a lot, but I think that those are some things that we could do as well as support State Representative Liz Miranda and her efforts, which she's been bringing food to the community as well and needing volunteers, which DSNI has worked with also, so that we could do food distributions to folks who have been affected right now by the pandemic. And again, we're seeing that a lot of those have to do with immigrant families who are losing a lot of money in the process and need food right now and healthcare.
Absolutely. Tim, did you want to say something quickly before we move forward?
Yeah, I think that there's a long agreed across the board, as well as thinking about like what does continued public access in terms of transportation look like to that area in terms of people being able to physically get there for the robust programming that's being offered. Obviously, the programming, focusing and highlighting the individuals who currently live in that area, in the neighborhood, and basing that programming around their needs, as well as understanding that like when there's more access to a city area like that, that increases the potential for local businesses to thrive and brings more business and foot traffic to the area and makes it something that's accessible and gives individuals an incentive to go into those programs and removing some of the barriers that might prevent them from traveling to the area. I think that in addition to that is also like really kind of how do we, in a sense, think about, or not think about, but there's a number of those red flags that, you know, have been barriers to doing things as an organization that primarily programs for the Black community. Things like increased insurance to be able to host an event that features hip hop R&B artists, like the loopholes and the barriers that we had to go through just to host the event that featured Black bodies, that had, you know, music and genres that, you know, came from that focus on hip hop and R&B. We almost weren't able to have the event just from simply not being able to find an insurer that would give us insurance to be able to do those things. Or even I also am on the team for BAMS Fest, which is Boston Art, Music, and Soul Fest. And our event is hosted at Franklin Park in Dorchester. And there's just a number of red flags that we had to go through, or red tape that we had to kind of navigate in order to host a free event for the community. Like, there's a lot of barriers that are set in place for organizations of color that feature and focus on communities of color out of fear or out of a track record that's a part of history that's no longer relevant to like where we are right now, that make it that much more complex for organizers and cultural facilitators to be able to host and produce things for the community.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for sharing that and illuminating that, because that's a very important feature of the conversation, particularly in the live music world, as well as we think about like a holistic view of art. I want to say very quickly before we go to our first comment or viewer question, we all know that we are in an election year. We all know how important it is to vote and to use our vote and our voice to address policy. And something that we really want everyone to like take a moment to do is to register to vote and vote. And this is across the world, globally, but especially here in the United States, and especially here in Massachusetts. And the Massachusetts Voters Table pulled together some data for us that shows that the turnout in Upham's Corner for elections is typically 5 to 8% behind the rest of the city. And we are going to drop some information in some of our chats, I believe, and it'll definitely be on our website. It's really important to utilize the vote and the power of your voice via your vote. And so as we are kind of thinking about these policies, as we are thinking about all of the people who affect these policies, we also need to think about how we can galvanize. And the main way we do that is to kind of get some collective energy around voting and put folks in the position who are going to be able to advocate for the things that we want to see happening in our city in order to get to this better future. So that's our big plea. Ramona, I see you. We only have a couple minutes left, so I'm gonna go to you, but like I want to be able to get to a couple of these audience questions. Go for it.
Really quickly, I just wanted to, on that note, BS&I does a lot of the calls we work with Mass Voter Table. If folks are interested in volunteering, that's one of the areas that are part of our district and ward that we make calls, and it is tricky. So anybody who's interested in volunteering, please let us know. We'd love to have more people help make these phone calls because they're really needed and it would be really useful. That's all.
That's a great action step, right? Anybody who's watching, we can make a phone call from anywhere. So anyone who's watching, please reach out and we'll drop that in our action step list. So I want to go to a question from one of our viewers, Christina. So Humphrey Street Studio is an artist/artisan complex off of Dudley and Upham. And she has had a studio space since 2004, and the space has been around since 2000. And they're working to keep it a space for artists. And as the art area is becoming more gentrified and the building is on the market and there's an interested developer, what are some ways that we can kind of help think through saving artist space in our neighborhoods, in Upham specifically, but also across the city of Boston? Thoughts, ideas on saving our artist spaces?
Yeah, so it's a really tough question, and it's a situation where where a building is being sold, where my office has tried to get in there really quickly and try to work with artists and see if there's a possibility for the artists who are there to actually buy the building with support from different sources. Because I think one of the things that we've learned just looking at the history of artist spaces in Boston, if you don't own it, you're going to lose it at some point. Like the ownership is really the key, and that's why like the land trust, is able to do what it does. It's like that level of control over the future of the space is like the ultimate goal, I think. So we've seen examples where groups of artists can kind of try to pool together funds and then meet with other kinds of backers who could maybe support that. So we're happy to have conversations about it and see what connections we can make. I wish that we had, and this goes back to what I was saying before from a policy level, I wish we had an entity in place that could help step in and acquire the building and then help artists or tenants work their way to actually owning it or having a stake in that property. Because I think the biggest hurdle is trying to get together and like legally form an entity and get the funds together to actually acquire something. Being able to do that between the time that you find out that a building is going to be sold or people are walking around, with measuring tape, sometimes is the first way that people know, right, that something's going on. It's hard to ramp up between that and the building potentially being sold, but we have seen some cases where landlords or owners will engage in conversations with groups of artists and try to give them a chance to make that offer. So we're happy to help. And please reach out to me. And I believe someone from Humphrey Studios has reached out to me, and maybe it's you, in which case we'll be meeting soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking that time. So I was just given the memo that we only have 3 minutes left. I want to ask one other quick question. So a brief answer, and it's really about accessibility in terms of how do we think we can do this successfully, not just summer in Upham, but moving forward when we are thinking about those who may not have the ability to access a digital presence, and what does it mean to sort of create opportunities for storytelling, for any artwork that exists outside of a Wi-Fi medium?
I'll jump in really quick here. There's something that we've been talking collectively. You talked about our group earlier, that like radical welcoming, right? How do we welcome people back into space and maybe do that in small doses? And some of the ways that we're thinking about doing that are like these small mini, as I said, Upham's Corner, Main Streets, and Artists Humanities are doing like small mini art tours, right? With small groups of people thinking about social distancing, or these small ways that artists can reinvigorate like city-state laws around social distancing for small businesses, right? How could we activate the ground and activate buildings and stuff like that? But also the Fairmont Innovation Lab is thinking about doing podcasts. Think of like online shopping and the old school like ways, but doing that through the radio too, right? We have access to radio. How could we also reinvigorate the radio and think of the ways that we can to do that again? And so I think the Fairmont Innovation Lab is doing that as well. But how can we get each resident and somebody in the neighborhood to welcome each other? Also mailing gifts to each other, right? Maybe there's phone calls, phone ways to talk to each other through phone threads. And so those are some of the things that we've been thinking about. And how do we do that? Maybe at the same time, folks come out of their doors outside. This is something from Children's Services of Roxbury, all at the same time to welcome each other, wave to each other, dance in front of your doorstep, and then go back in, right? Like, how do we welcome each other back into space? So
yeah.
That was my quick.
I appreciate it. We really appreciate it. And it's so tough. I mean, this is such a great conversation, so much to cover. We could talk for another hour, but we're almost out of time. And we have one other special, amazing thing that I want to make sure we share. So first of all, I want to say thank you all for joining us in the conversation and in your energy to sort of keep elevating the space for our city's young people, for our artists, for the culture of the city of Boston. And we're doing something for the first time ever on our Better Future series. We have a live performance from Tim. So thank you so much for being with us. And Tim, the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thank you again. Also, Ramona and Kara, y'all are awesome. Summer, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, into the Company One team. This piece is titled Trust the Process. It is from my spoken word book. It's a book of poems titled, the book is titled Trust the Process, and I wrote it during a really difficult time, struggling, and my professor gave me this rock that had Trust the Process written on it, and it really just kind of got me through the remainder of my semester, and hopefully it is something that connects with you and you trusting your own process, trusting that you will get through whatever it is that you're getting through, and creating some sort of space for you to figure out what that process looks like and how you're going to maneuver through it. So as I raise my hand here to my chest, feel free to also recite Trust the Process in your own space. Feel free to close your eyes or stand or dance or whatever you need to get into a really calm and reflective space. So, trust the process. When the day looks impossible, the couch feels comfortable, and sun rays splashing from the bay windows look uneventful. Trust the process. When a conversation with your partner seems daunting, and all your feelings do are eat away at your tongue's ability to produce words. Trust the process. When depression is the dust that refuses to be swept from the floor, and all you want is freedom from having to clean up the destructive thoughts that fall. Trust the process. When fear resembles the worn notebook in your book bag, the rarely open Evernote app on your phone, or the twice folded Post-it notes dusting your desk that stare and hover and wait and tire and toggle and get misplaced and are found and still not used. Trust the process. 1, you are tired and the couch is still warm from the imprint of your back. Close your beautiful eyes and feel the sun rays wash your tired away. 2, your feelings matter and your words hold value, use them. It is impossible for your partner to know the lining of your mind, heart, or hurt. 3, when the dust settles, you will still be a person, all pumping blood, moving limbs, and processing mind. Press your quaking hand against the valley of your chest, the home where survival lives, the carrier of your liberation. 4, sound waves need not an ear to be heard, nor a piece of skin to scare. Listen to the silence of your beautiful body and welcome the music in your story. 5. Trust the process of your healing. Trust the process of your hope. Trust the process of your deliverance. Trust the process of your mindfulness. Trust the process of your pen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tim. That was so great. And thank you so much for sending us off with that message. That was really awesome. And thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our ASL interpreters for joining us today. This is all so amazing. And thank you all for joining us for episode 2 of the Better Future series. For more information and resources that our panelists have mentioned today and action steps that you can take, please visit us at company1.org/betterfuture. And also, if you enjoyed today's programming, please consider making a donation to Company One in order to support future events like this one. To donate, please visit company1.org/donate. That link is also in the bio, the description of this video, and it's also going to be placed in the chat. And we also will be dropping a link to a survey in the comment section. Please fill it out and let us know about your experience. We'll be sharing some of the resources that came from that discussion as well in the survey. We hope to see you again for episode 2, which is happening next month in August with Monica Cannon Grant of Violence in Boston and Ashley Rose, who is a local poet, and more guests to be announced soon. Thank you so much and have a good day. Bye.